My beloved brothers and sisters, today I want to share with you something that many people speak about, but very few truly understand. You may have heard people say, don't sleep after Asr. It will harm you. It will affect your mind. It will bring bad luck. But is this really what Islam teaches? Or is it just a cultural belief passed down through generations? In this video, we will look at the authentic teachings of the Qur'an and Sunnah and what the scholars of Islam have said about this matter. We will also discuss the practical effects of sleeping after Asr and most importantly, the balanced approach that Islam encourages us to adopt in our daily lives. Stay with me until the end because this is something that 90% of Muslims are unaware of. By understanding it, you will protect both your worship and your health, inshallah. One of the biggest reasons Muslims are often uncertain about sleeping after Asr is the confusion between cultural practices and authentic religious teachings. Throughout history, cultural traditions and family sayings have been passed down from generation to generation, and over time, many of these practices have been mistakenly assumed to be part of Islam. The topic of sleeping after Asr is a clear example of this misunderstanding. In many Muslim households, children grow up hearing statements like, never sleep after Asr. It will bring bad luck, or if you sleep after Asr, you will lose your memory. These warnings are repeated so often that they begin to sound like religious rulings. However, when we examine the sources of Islam, Qur'an and authentic Sunnah, we find that there is no explicit prohibition against sleeping after Asr. Instead, most of the warnings about this practice come from cultural beliefs, weak narrations, or personal experiences rather than from clear, authentic hadith. For example, some weak narrations exist which suggest negative consequences of sleeping after Asr, such as facing disturbances or confusion. But scholars of hadith have clarified that these reports are not reliable. Unfortunately, over time, many Muslims accepted these weak narrations as facts, blending them into daily culture. This is where the line between culture and religion becomes blurred. In reality, Islam does not forbid sleeping after Asr. What Islam teaches us is balance, moderation, and mindfulness of our obligations. If a person sleeps after Asr but wakes up on time for Maghrib prayer and their health is not harmed, there is no sin upon them. However, if someone's nap makes them lazy, causes headaches, or leads them to miss Maghrib, then it becomes discouraged, not because the act itself is haram, but because of the negative consequences it brings. This shows us an important principle in Islam. Not everything discouraged is haram, and not everything cultural is automatically part of the deen. Religion is based on evidence from Qur'an and authentic Sunnah, not on inherited sayings or superstitions. By confusing cultural warnings with divine rulings, people unintentionally add unnecessary restrictions to the religion, making it seem more rigid than it actually is. The Prophet Muhammad himself valued rest and allowed people to sleep when needed, as long as obligations were not neglected. He encouraged the Layl midday nap before Dawt, which is proven in Sunnah, but he never gave a strict ruling against sleeping after Asr. The dislike for it came more from observation of its effects, like heaviness or drowsiness, rather than from revelation. Therefore, Muslims today must be careful not to mix cultural habits with Islam. It is important to ask, is this ruling truly from Qur'an and Sunnah, or is it simply a cultural tradition? By making this distinction, we protect the purity of our religion and prevent confusion for future generations. In short, the belief that sleeping after Asr is absolutely forbidden is a cultural misunderstanding, not a religious ruling. Islam is a religion of clarity, not confusion. Once we separate authentic teachings from cultural habits, we can follow our faith with confidence, knowing what is truly from Allah and His Messenger. When it comes to the matter of sleeping after Asr, scholars of Islam have held different views, largely due to the lack of explicit commands in the Qur'an and authentic Sunnah. Unlike the 5 daily prayers, fasting or zakat, which have clear instructions, sleeping after Asr is not directly addressed in the Qur'an. Instead, opinions have been formed through hadith analysis, observations of health effects, and reasoning based on Islamic principles. 1. No clear Quranic prohibition. The Qur'an encourages rest and sleep as a blessing from Allah, and it does not restrict sleep to specific hours. Allah says, and we made your sleep a means of rest. Surah An-Naba 70:89. This verse highlights that sleep itself is a mercy and a gift from Allah. However, the Qur'an does not mention sleeping after Asr specifically, leaving scholars to rely on Sunnah and practical wisdom. 2. Weak hadith narrations. There are narrations attributed to the Prophet about the dislike of sleeping after Asr, but scholars of hadith have declared most of them as weak daf. For example, a narration states that whoever sleeps after Asr and loses their mind should blame no one but themselves. However, narration has been classified as weak and unreliable by scholars such as Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. Because Islam is based on authentic evidence, weak narrations cannot be used to establish firm rulings. Thus, no authentic hadith directly prohibits sleeping after Asr. 3. Views of classical scholars. Despite the weakness of the hadith, some classical scholars still advised avoiding sleep at this time. Their reasoning was practical, not legislative. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah in his book Zad al-Ma'ad mentioned that certain times of the day are less suitable for sleep because they may harm health or cause disturbed dreams. Similarly, some scholars noted that napping after Asr often causes heaviness, headaches, or makes people lazy, which could lead to neglecting Maghrib prayer. Other scholars, however, argue that if a person needs rest due to work or illness, there is nothing wrong with sleeping after Asr. Their principle was simple: as long as obligations like prayer are not missed, sleep at any time is permissible. 4. Balanced scholarly conclusion. The majority of scholars did not declare sleeping after Asr as haram, say forbidden. Instead, they viewed it as makruh, disliked if it leads to negative consequences such as missing Maghrib or harming one's health. If none of these consequences occur, then there is no sin and no prohibition. 5. The principle of avoiding harm. The Prophet taught, do not cause harm or return harm. See Hadith Tibi Majah 2341 Hassan. Based on this principle, scholars concluded that the ruling on sleeping after Asr depends on whether it causes harm. If it disrupts health or prayer, it should be avoided. If it benefits the body and does not interfere with worship, it is allowed. In summary, scholars agree that there is no authentic prohibition from Qur'an or Sunnah against sleeping after Asr. The discouragement is mainly practical and cultural, not religious. Islam encourages balance, so the ruling depends on the circumstances of the individual. What matters most is safeguarding the obligatory prayers and maintaining health. When scholars and communities speak about the concern of sleeping after Asr, much of it is rooted not in strict religious prohibition, but in the practical consequences that often follow this habit. Islam is a religion of balance, and anything that harms a person's health, productivity, or spiritual obligations is discouraged. Sleeping after Asr falls into this category, not because it is inherently sinful, but because of the side effects it may bring. Disturbance of the body's natural rhythm. The human body is designed with natural cycles of alertness and rest. After Asr, the body is generally preparing for the evening, digestion, and eventually night sleep. Sleeping at this time often confuses the circadian rhythm, leading to grogginess, headaches, and heaviness upon waking. Many people report that even a short nap after Asr leaves them feeling more tired than before, unlike the midday Kailula siesta before Zuhr, which refreshes the body. Risk of missing Maghrib prayer. One of the biggest concerns about sleeping after Asr is the possibility of oversleeping and missing Maghrib prayer. Maghrib is a short and time-sensitive salah, beginning at sunset and lasting only until the twilight disappears. If someone falls into a deep sleep after Asr, they may not wake up on time to perform Maghrib within its window. The Prophet said, "The most beloved of deeds to Allah are those performed regularly, even if they are few." So Bukhari, a Muslim, this highlights the importance of guarding obligatory prayers with consistency. Sleeping after Asr puts this at risk. It becomes a harmful practice. Impact on mental state. Some early scholars and physicians observed that people who made a habit of sleeping after Asr complained of disturbed dreams, lack of focus, or even forgetfulness. While modern science may explain this as disrupted sleep cycles or incomplete rest, in the past it was attributed to spiritual or mental effects. Even today, many people find that sleeping after Asr leaves them restless at night, making it harder to sleep after Usha, which in turn affects waking up for Fajr and Tahajjud. Laziness and reduced productivity. Islam encourages productivity, energy, and purposeful living. The Prophet made dua against laziness, saying, "O Allah, I seek refuge in you from incapacity and laziness." Sunan Abu Dawud 59. Sleeping after Asr can fuel habits of laziness, where the person feels sluggish and unmotivated to engage in beneficial activities such as Qur'an recitation, family time, or preparing for Maghrib and Isha prayers. Instead of being a time of winding down productively, it may turn into wasted hours. Exception for genuine need. At the same time, practical life acknowledges exceptions. A person who works at night, such as in hospitals or security, may need to sleep after Asr to recover. In such cases, scholars say there is no harm as long as prayer is safeguarded and health is maintained. The harm arises when the sleep leads to negligence of obligations or consistent physical discomfort. The practical effects of sleeping after Asr, headaches, heaviness, missed Maghrib, and reduced productivity are the main reasons why it is discouraged. Islam does not forbid it outright, but advises Muslims to act with wisdom. Sleep at this time benefits you without harming worship or health. It is allowed, but if it leads to laziness and missed prayers, it is best to avoid. One of the most beautiful qualities of Islam is its balance. Allah describes this ummah as justly balanced nation. So Surah Al-Baqarah 21-30, this balance applies not only to acts of worship, but also to daily habits such as eating, sleeping, and resting. When it comes to sleeping after Asr, the balanced Islamic approach is neither strict prohibition nor unrestricted allowance. It is moderation based on one's situation and the principle of avoiding harm. No sin without clear evidence. Islam does not label actions as haram unless there is clear and authentic evidence from the Qur'an or Sunnah. Since there is no Sahih Hadith that explicitly forbids sleeping after Asr, Muslims should not declare it sinful. To do so would be to speak about Allah without knowledge, which the Quran warns against. Do not say about what your tongues assert of untruth. This is lawful and this is unlawful, to invent falsehood about Allah. So Surah An-Nahl 16:16 is in see thus. While some scholars advised against sleeping after Asr due to its effects, they did not declare it haram. Flexibility based on individual circumstances. Islam recognizes that every believer has different needs. For someone who is exhausted, ill, or working night shifts, a nap after Asr may be necessary and even beneficial. On the other hand, for a person who easily misses Maghrib or feels heavy after such a nap, it is wiser to avoid it. The Prophet himself encouraged flexibility, saying, "Make things easy and do not make them difficult. Give glad tidings, do not drive people away." Zabari and Muslim, this principle ensures that Muslims avoid extremism and adapt rulings to their circumstances. Focus on safeguarding obligatory worship. The heart of Islamic life is protecting the 5 daily prayers. Any habit that threatens Salah is discouraged. Sleeping after Asr, if it causes someone to miss Maghrib, is harmful. But if a person can control their sleep and wake in time, then there is no issue. Islam always prioritizes obligations over personal comfort. Avoiding harm and seeking benefit, a guiding principle in Islamic law, is there should be neither harm nor reciprocating harm. So Hadith Ibn Majah 2341 Hassan, if sleeping after Asr causes headaches, laziness, or neglect of Salah, then it should be avoided. But if it benefits the body and does not cause harm, it is allowed. This balanced view prevents Muslims from falling into unnecessary guilt or adopting rigid practices not rooted in authentic teachings. A middle path between culture and religion. Many cultures strongly discourage sleeping after Asr, sometimes treating it as outright sinful. Islam, however, does not support such extremes. The balanced approach is to recognize the difference between cultural warnings set based on observed effects and religious rulings based on Qur'an and Sunnah. Both can coexist if Muslims keep their priorities clear. The balanced Islamic approach is clear: sleeping after Asr is not haram, but it may be discouraged if it brings harm, especially in missing Maghrib or causing health issues. Islam teaches moderation, neither blind prohibition nor careless allowance. What matters most is safeguarding prayer, maintaining health, and using time productively. This middle path reflects the wisdom and mercy of Islam, which guides believers to live lives of balance in every aspect.